Hello, here begins the late night show. Today we're going to be talking about language and gender. There's been a shift in the paradigm of the use of language of men and women, which used to be organized about the concept of binary gender difference. Now it is concerned with the diversity of gender identities and gendered practices. Now we will be joined by two experts of the matter. Please welcome Laura Terrence and Katelyn Howard. In this episode, we're going to be talking about language, gender, and sexuality, current issues and new directions. I assume that you read it, right?
Yes, we've read it.
Yeah, you invited us to talk about it today.
Oh, of course you did it. Now, what can you tell us about it?
Well, I think we should start talking about modern feminism, the modern approach. You know, Simone de Beauvoir believed that there's a difference between the innate biological condition of being female and the achieved social-cultural status of being a woman. That is, that you are not born a woman, you become one. Gender is something that you have, okay? For the feminist linguists in the early 1970s, the issue was to show how language was implicated in the process of becoming a woman or a man. You know, linguistic gender differences are treated as a result of patriarchal socialization, which produced the two groups as different and unequal. So you see how that type of approach studies the differences between gender. You know, Robin Lakoff characterized women's language by indexing feminine gender as powerless and trivial. Not that she was saying that, but that's how it was seen. Robin Lakoff placed emphasis in the inequalities of gender and language. Male dominance and female subordination were reproduced in linguistic behavior. And also, Deborah Tannen in the 90s, she believed that boys and girls learn two different ways of speaking, of expressing themselves, and that they belong to a different subcultures, which creates a sort of barrier between their communication. So dominance and difference researchers regarded linguistic differences as something that happens with gender rather than with sex. That means it happens with early socialization in your infancy.
Yes, and following with what Katelyn was saying, postmodernism view puts an emphasis on diversity, and it has an urge to deconstruct all binary oppositions. So conversely to what Katelyn said, gender isn't something you have, it's something you perform, it's something you do.
And do you believe there is a goal of political activity in this topic?
I think of course it is. Feminism has been a major factor in bringing social change and new approaches to gender in linguistic and other social scientific research. So every research that we make as feminists includes also committed political research.
It's all connected. You know, one reason why the dominance approach to language, which is the one that we were discussing before, now seems unsatisfactory is that we're no longer confronted with the same rigid gender hierarchy. You know, it is still there, but it is not quite as brutal as it used to be.
And we can also see that Deborah Cameron in her article refers to the topic, the linguistical performance of gender diversity, right?
Yes.
How can you?
Well, part of the aim of gender diversity is to challenge this notion that we have of a single prototype for what's masculine or what's feminine, and by calling attention to the multiplicity of gender sexual identities that it is possible to perform.
You know what drew my attention was that Cameron, in her article, refers to married couples, is that, and I quote, "Nerds can be considered queer in the sense that they reject the heteronormative values of mainstream youth culture. Net femininity is not about being cool, but it involves displaying intelligence and educational aspirations openly, and formal standard language is one key resource for doing that."
Yes, exactly. They're actively styling themselves rather than merely acting on a gender template that they were socialized in, which takes us to gender sexuality and heteronormativity. People always are used to acting on a way that they're supposed to do based on their gender templates. The perceived relationship of gender to sexual identity can be expected to influence the linguistic performance of both men and women. You know, Penelope Eckert has studied the emergence of a heterosexual market. You know, in pre-adolescence, there is an overriding social imperative to display one's continuous development towards maturity. They see immaturity as something that is negative. You know, sexuality is probably the best vehicle to express one's maturity, right? That's why you see kids getting boyfriends or girlfriends to express that they are mature. And even when those relationships are not erotic or they're not kind of sexual in a way, they are only together to create a talk between their peers, their friends. And you know, the same heterosexual market is also an arena in which individuals negotiate their relationship with same-sex peers. Not in an erotic way, as I was saying before, but in a social one.
So there is clearly a difference between public and private speech. One item really high on the agenda was the part played by language in the exclusion of women in public spaces. It reminds me of Deborah Tannen's text called You Just Don't Understand, which also states a clear difference between public and private speech and which gender dominates in which of the contexts. A good example of this is Margaret Thatcher, who in 1979 became Britain's first woman prime minister. Well, she was, as we all know, forced shortly thereafter to submit to a linguistics makeover, lowering her voice pitch by almost half the normal range and slowing her delivery to sound more authoritative.
And you know, also Sylvia Shaw, she investigated 100 new female members of parliament who experienced contradictory pressures. On the one hand, to perform their job very well, you know, very seriously, and on the other hand, they had to use their difference, their femininity, to say something, their femininity to do something better than men, to be a better debater, to be less violent in the debate, in a very serious debate, you know? So men and women are being forced to balance those two forces of feminine and masculine in their workplaces to do better at their jobs.
Yeah, and in some workplaces, it is no longer a stereotypically masculine style of language use that constitutes the norm. Economic globalization is affecting workplace linguistic norms, and in many cases feminizing them in order to be more appealing to my public and my guests. Thank you so much for being here. It was a lovely conversation. Laura and Katelyn, everyone. Now we'll be back. Now we're gonna see an interesting report by Harold Fox.
Issues of language and gender in second and foreign language education.
The most well-known gendered aspect of second and foreign language learning is probably that girls tend to perform better. Teachers may believe that girls are the best language learners. Such beliefs may rely on their expectations and treatment towards the students. This suggests that social reasons play a role in a subject choice. A couple of questions rise. Are girls channeled away from other subjects, and might those other subjects have led to different and perhaps better career paths? Is there a biological component to girls being better at a language than boys?
No, according to Clondelius, possible sex differences in the structure of the rate of language acquisition cannot be made plausible by biological hypotheses. So these differences may be caused by social reasons rather than biological ones.
An interesting report by Hyde and Lynn shows a decline in gender differences in studies of verbal activity between the 50s and the 80s, probably due to the increased flexibility in gender roles beginning in the 70s. Boys are being more engaged in activities formerly reserved for girls.
Teachers say that boys' motivation is affected by several factors. One of them is doing well in foreign languages is not the norm. 2. Boys are simply not skilled at communicating. 3. There are insufficient male teachers of languages. And 4. That boys are less oriented to schoolwork in general. One study of university seminars with roughly the same number of women and men found almost twice as many contributions coming from the men. However, girls' higher achievement in a given subject does not refute boys' dominance of classroom or its importance. It is logical.
Bravo found that in mixed-sex pairs, females asked nearly twice as many leading questions as males did. One interesting explanation Bravo offers for his own findings is that speaking a second language can empower the relatively powerless and strip some of the power from the powerful.
Is English shifting towards being a non-sexist language? Linguistic items include the generics he and man. The genericity of these masculine forms in English has been seriously challenged. Nowadays, in many contexts, they have an old-fashioned feeling to them and are often substituted by alternatives such as people and singular they, especially in talk.
A recent study by Prachter reports no positive developments towards gender fairness in learners' dictionaries of English, even those which use invented examples. A Langman Dictionary of Contemporary English is the most recommendable from a feminist point of view.
So what can teachers do to avoid gender-regressive strategies in classrooms? Well, they can start by explicitly discussing stereotypical representations in text.
Now, there are new theorizations of language and gender. Identification of gender differences was done with a well-intentioned view exposing new theorizations are characterized by 1. Seeing gender as identity, and this identity as both multiple and fluid. 2. The social representation of gender. 3. The ongoing social and linguistic construction of gender, becoming rather than being. 4. The importance of individual agency and of contestation. As it has been shown, factors of dominance in the classroom and representation in teaching materials would on the whole seem to disadvantage female learners more than males. Claims of innate ability are far from satisfactory, and studies of language learning strategies show far greater tender similarity than difference. Nyland suggests that while masculinity is a social accomplishment, the signifier of masculine identity will change with different interactional contexts.
Hi guys, it's me again, your friend, Jimmy B. After watching the two interesting segments regarding language and sexuality, now moving to the next part of the show, we'll have a discussion with part of the audience.
Hi.
Okay, and here, please your name.
Josh.
Emma.
And Erika.
Thank you guys for joining. So, what can you tell me about the articles?
Well, for starters, the article by Deborah Cameron, it was a very historical thing, you know? It talked about the modern approach and the postmodern approach.
Right.
And the text by Jane Sunderland was much more technical. It had a lot of studies that kind of carried results with the hypothesis.
Yeah.
Yeah, and basically is that the big difference, because Deborah Cameron talks about society and a bigger aspect of what is gender and how society takes gender, and the other author talks about more concrete things in schools and how boys and girls grow up.
And following with what you said about gender, I think we all can see a similarity that involves gender roles. As in Cameron, she talks about, well, the conclusion actually is about how gender roles aren't now as
They're shifting.
yes.
Is that what you meant?
Yes, thank you. And in Sunderland text also says that with time, more boys have been approaching this activities related to language that were usually female regarded.
Yes, I think that is one of the most important conclusions by both of these authors. They both concluded that there has been a change in time due to feminism mostly, that now men are more open to accept femininities and leaving behind heteronormativity. You know, now men are more open to different activities that, as you said, were usually reserved for women.
Now, do you think there is there any biological component to girls being better than boys at language?
Definitely not. It was actually shown in the previous note that there is no plausible biological hypothesis that can prove that.
And this is completely made up by our own social constructs of gender roles, right? So I believe that these constructs may put the idea in us to be more confident about language, and male students are being said that they aren't supposed to be good at language, therefore that same thing could mark and the generations.
Kind of making them avoid studying languages.
Yeah.
Yes, something like language is connected with other things that are more feminine, and takes that path instead of what is a man supposed to do.
Yeah, I think that takes us to the heteronormativity chapter on the Deborah Cameron article, where she talks about us kind of disregarding those previous conceptions of what is masculine and what is feminine, so that we can all kind of reach an agreement on what is better for our students and for our teachers to do, you know? Like teaching our kids that it's not okay to be in one or other extreme, that you can actually play with those, with the fluidity of gender, you know?
Yeah, thank you guys. Now I want you to tell me about your experience. I understand that you all study at university, right?
Yes.
So have you noticed any of these behavioral or linguistic differences that are discussed in the articles?
I study English pedagogy, and I see that every year that goes by, more men are entering the program, and we don't have those stereotypes on us, and we don't believe that we'll have it with the students will have, right? I don't think I will have those notions in my head, so that's very fulfilling for me.
I think that's very important to have as supporting professors at university, and also teachers at school that kind of believe in you for who you are, but by who you're trying to be, and by your abilities that you kind of work on, rather than the abilities that you are born with because you're a woman or a man.
Yes, and I also have seen in my career that now we are the first generations to have women professors in the career in that university, because it's like Sandra said in the text that in schools they are more likely to have women teachers than in university. So now we are seeing those changes like right now.
Now, according to the two authors, there have been changes regarding gender role and how we see masculinity and femininity, right? To what extent do you think these changes are applicable in our country or in our educational system?
Well, as I was saying before about our classes nowadays, I think there is clearly a change. The heteronormativity has almost died, and it's evolving into a free class, a free classroom, and a more safe environment for everyone.
I think those changes are also not only responsibility of teachers and only in the classroom. You know, family is a key component to applying those changes and to letting kids be themselves without typecasting them in a masculine boy or a feminine girl.
We are changing the way the social construction is like shaping itself. Various elements are changing, the family and the school, and the expectation of what a girl is and what a boy is changing. So this is always something we can count on, and we are evolving through those elements and how they change and progress.
Yeah, and I would like to add that educational policies are very, very essential in the changes. I mean, we can change socially, but if these modifications aren't, backed with a political a change, let's say that, it cannot really advance in a very firm curricula.
Yes.
Okay, so thank you for participating in this roundtable. So this has been the episode of the Late Night Show. Thank you for watching and see you next time.